Oh, hello there, and welcome to Film Talking D20. That's right, I'm back with Monster Core. No, that's not some new terrible form of metal music of which people will surely enjoy. Oh no, it is the new Monsters Manual, referred to now as Monster Core. One, I presume, because there's clearly going to be more. But it's time to talk about the big changes in Monster Core. That's right, Bugbear is exactly the same. That wasn't quite what I was hoping for when it came to impactful kind of opening comments. Perhaps I should talk about how the Balor is gone. I mean, from personal perspective, the Balor being gone, I have been on the wrong end of a Balor many times. And I can assure you that even when you beat them and they blow up and they still kill the party, they are terrible. So, although part of me is very sad to see something as iconic as a Balor having to be removed from Paizo's official kind of documentation because Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro were absolute. And now, to free themselves from OGL, they've had to make sacrifices. They've done a good job of finding a replacement. Steve, his name is, he's very committed to being something akin to a Balor, without all the necessary trappings that make him a patsy of Wizards of the Coast. So, I've done a little kind of rundown of some examples of very simple changes that I wanted to start with. And the reason I joked about Bugbear being unchanged is because there is a strong theme of a lot of stuff being the same because it isn't proprietary owned by Wizards of the Coast. So the Bugbear is literally exactly the same. There's no changes. There's quite a lot of stuff that is completely original. River Drake is now armor class 17 instead of armor class 19. So again, I think when they've been doing this process of revisiting who they are, revisiting what they do, and looking at their numbers and their balance, little things like that have dripped in where they've been like, maybe we should just tone this monster down just a touch to bring some more balance to its encounters, as perhaps it was overperforming for the challenge rating they'd assigned it. But other than that, Drakes are still there in their entirety, which is good. Purple Worm is now called a cave worm, as another example of a way that they have kind of maneuvered around certain problems. But again, it's still very much in the same vein. There's very little change. It's just they changed the name to protect themselves from evil wizards. Now, the first set of quite interesting and unique changes come to Hags, which is a good thing in my book because Hags are a very classical monster, a very classical kind of villainous kind of being in a world. I mean, they start in, we see them back in Shakespeare. So if a hag is good enough for Shakespeare, I think we can agree it's good enough for our tabletop roleplay games. The Bard, as he was called. Perhaps also the reference for the player class. Who knows? Perhaps we have more ties to classical English literature in our TTRPG community than we ever supposed. But anyway, hags. Let's have a quick rundown of these. So Sea Hag is very, very similar. They haven't changed a great deal at all. What they have done is they've massively improved the Sea Hag's bargain, which in the original Monsters Manual was a bit woolly. And when I say a bit woolly, it was very woolly. Now they've done a great job of clarifying what you sacrifice and what you gain when you enter into a hag's bargain, and how you go about freeing yourself from it, which normally involves killing said hag. But I'm sure there's other ways of weaseling out of it. But they've done a great job of defining it properly and clearly, so that in desperate circumstances you can do an illicit deal with a hag to kind of get some advantage, or perhaps in a dire circumstance remove something negative at the cost of something else negative. But again, it's very, very cool to see that kind of important facet of hags much better defined and fleshed out. Now the green hag has gone. And that's a challenge rating 4 monster. And what they've replaced it with is a sweet hag, which is much more appropriate to its challenge rating level, and is much more a kind of Brothers Grimm kind of sweet shop maker, a trapper and stealer of a villager's children, a kind of a much more, well, I mean, I've already said it, a much more Brothers Grimm, Hansel and Gretel style fairy tale, kind of lower challenge rating, early level mini boss, which is great because the Green Hag had kind of ideals above its station in terms of it felt like the kind of thing, because it was much more classical kind of Shakespearean hag, it felt like something that you would want to put in at higher levels where you had other options, so it didn't really work. Although I've used green hags to great effect, I think they're fantastic. I really enjoy hags in the world. I think they have a great place to play as kind of malevolent kind of meddlers in society. But Sweet Hag now is much more focused on, as you may have guessed, kind of trick treats and that kind of evil malevolence. Very similar abilities, just slightly retailored and rethemed. The next step up from Sweet Hags, the Anise Hag, has gone and been renamed the Iron Hag, which is essentially a slightly more dangerous-y kind of combat kind of villain. And to reflect this, they have changed its damage reduction from 5, only bypassed by bludgeoning, to damage reduction 3, only bypassed by adamantium. So that's quite interesting because, I mean, at its challenge rating 6, kind of encounter level, I'd be amazed if many parties just happen to be rocking a adamantium great axe or even an adamantium dagger. So that's quite fun. That's a permanent kind of debuff you're going to take unless you are really specialised in as a kind of hag hunter. To reflect that though, they have tweaked the hit points. The hit points have dropped from 85 to 80. Again, they are the masters of maths and balance, all things balanced as they should be. So, again though, very similar builds to the Anise Hag. They haven't changed too much, but they've just kind of tweaked it, tailored it, and then kind of moved on. Night Hag has gone and has been replaced at challenge rank 9 by a Cuckoo Hag. And what they've done is they've taken the voice stealer trope from the Green Hag, where it wasn't really that useful, because they've got the other options now with the Sweet Hag to use kind of sweet treats to kind of lure people in. They've given it to what is now the new Night Hag, the Cuckoo Hag, which is a bit like a succubus. It is a soul stealer in the way that the Nightmare Hag kind of was, but was much more like malevolent. This one is more of a trickster seducer that lures you in and steals your soul and keeps you trapped in its forever realm, which again I quite like as a very simple little tweak. Again, broadly speaking, very similar, but they've just made those little tweaks. But the thing that I really like, other than the Hag's Bargain being really fleshed out and defined as something meaningful in your game and in the world, is this Hag's Eye. So it's a magical item that hags create that can look like a bit of mundane jewellery, like a brooch or something simple like that, that they make from an eye of a victim. And it enables the hag to perceive through that item like a free scry spell, which is an incredibly potent tool in a world for kind of GM MacGuffininess of a villain that is perhaps manipulating people and observing kind of conversations that perhaps they wouldn't normally be able to observe, to kind of move pawns around to make things happen. And it's a totally legitimate item. It's totally specced out. It has price and level and all the other things you'd expect from an actual item, but it's keyed directly into the Hag monster entry, and is literally GM kind of stick it on a character, give it to an NPC in a town, and all of a sudden there's literally like a tapped phone line in your game, which is very, very cool. And that again feeds into what they've tried to do with hags. They've tried to again stop them just being here's a stat block monster, and turn them into here's a stat block monster that has a key purpose, role, and ability to carry out that function in your game world, regardless of what you're doing about it as a party, which is very, very cool. So, big fan of that. And like I said, simple but very, very nice changes. Now, moving on to something a bit juicier. Devils and demons have seen some changes. So they've kind of pushed imp out of the devil's list and just dropped it down to a general low level fiend, because in the great kind of scheme of the pantheons of hell, I don't think they rely on imps that much. So they've kind of just dropped them to the status of general fiend, and they're low level kind of, one bang, one trick ponies anyway. Like I said, they don't fit the kind of the big narrative of what hell is about, so they're just fiends. But the Barbazu has been replaced by what they call the Vordine, which is basically a more basic, straightforward, and kind of more sensible infantry demon. Because if you've ever looked at the Barbazu's kind of entry in the Monsters Manual, it has a lot of abilities. It's actually quite a complex monster, and it's only challenge rating 5. Which, if you're kind of starting out and getting into those kind of, I suppose, low, early mini-boss kind of combats, it's called an infantry demon. And then you look at it and it's like, oh, actually, this is quite complex. So they've done a very simple job of just going, we can't have that anymore. What's its actual job? What's its actual role? It's good at this. It's basically a good infantry fighting monster with a good weapon and some good abilities focused on combat. Nice and straightforward. Infantry demon. That's what it was always supposed to be. So they have taken the Qatari or Kotari in at challenge rating 7 to replace the Enris, which is out, which was challenge rating 8. It's still winged, but we're in a situation now where how they've kind of gone about it is they've made it like a victim of a curse. And they've kind of themed it in where it takes bleed damage and it has like the bargains that it's had wrought upon its body kind of tied into its soul. But when it comes to kind of a direct comparison, it's definitely not the Enris. It has its own place, it has its own lore, and they've done a great job of kind of theming it in and kind of balancing out what they're having to lose. A similar story at kind of higher levels. They've now mooched in what they call the Sar Glagon in a challenge rating 8, which is actually an aquatic based devil, and it can empower you to feel like you're drowning in its presence, all those kind of cool kind of tropes. And it's quite good as well, because before we were quite high level before we got to an aquatic based devil. So having some flexibility about where your campaign might be, what kind of environment you're in, having a bit more flexibility across challenge ratings to get environmental specific monsters kind of keyed in to the environment is actually a big advantage. Because when you're running a game and you have those kind of thoughts on what's contextually appropriate, what kind of environment best suits monsters where the party find themselves, sometimes you can have kind of holes in your arsenal as a DM, and that's quite a clever move, just to kind of plug a little gap and go, right, just in case, there you go. So we see also changing, and this is quite an interesting change, and the reason it's interesting is because devils kind of get away with it a little, kind of going through their schema, if you like. Oh, here's an interesting one, and I don't know why this is the case, but people on the internet may know. Moving on to the challenge rating 10, the Fistophilis. How are you supposed to pronounce that, by the way? It's the challenge rating devil at 10, which is literally the kind of the contract demon. Very cool artwork, lots of contract scrolls, horns, robes, looks like an official, probably a tax collector. That's unchanged, literally unchanged between 1E and 2E. In the one 2E, and then obviously where we are now with the kind of the new Monsters Manual editions. So they've got away with that one. Obviously not proprietary OGL. But the Gel Ugon Devil, which is challenge rating 13, is out and replaced by the Gailu, a challenge rating 14 kind of trickster, agent, infiltrator, manipulator devil. It's like James Bond, but a devil. A very cool kind of shape polymorphing, kind of sneaking, agent gathering, assassinating, kidnapping kind of style devil, which is very, very cool. Pit Fiend stays, but they've changed the name. And they've called it a Nessari devil. But they've kept everything about it, even the artwork is unchanged. It's the same. And I'm kind of curious as to why they haven't got away with changing the kind of the Balor in the same manner, especially because a Balor is in theory themed around a Balrog from Lord of the Rings. So again, in theory, a Balor is drawing its influence from outside of Wizards of the Coast. But again, obviously, they've had legal eagles like chasing this down, and they have decided that this is the case. It is under infringement, and they want to protect themselves. So they would know. Now, let's jump to Balor, or not Balor, the replacement for Balor quickly. I will bring it up in my PDF, and then I can have a bit of a rundown to give you an idea about how they fitted it in. Magma worm. So obviously I'd mentioned the purple worm was a cave worm. They've changed the other one, the red one. I can't remember the name of it in the original that was D&D proprietary. It's now a magma worm. Jogged. Other than that, the same. As I'm skimming through, Centaur, funnily enough, the same. One of the interesting things about orcs and other kind of races, actually, while I'm kind of talking about this, they have a nice broad spread of kind of opponents, and that includes a dwarven fighter, an elven ranger. It's kind of got a little kind of bit of keying in of like an NPC codex. And one of the other interesting things to remind everybody about is there's technically no alignment. I say technically, there isn't, but what there is obviously in the descriptions of the creatures. Chimera is still in, by the way. I'm just scrolling through. You can guess what letter I'm currently running at. For a moment, this is big news. For a moment, I thought the cockatrice was gone, and I was slightly annoyed about that because, again, I was just like, but that's Brothers Grimm. Different referencing in how they've kind of stacked it. It's still the same. Cockatrice, the kind of classic, ridiculous death chicken from hell, is still there at Challenge Rating 3. Good news. Cyclopses are still in. We're still going through C, but I can stop and ping things out at you as we go through. Daemons are still there because daemons and demons are different. The AE, not just the E. But again, the Astrodemon and things, they're unchanged. Pusk is a new demon, which is the Challenge Rating 2 kind of rubbishy little kind of entry-level demon. Brimarax are still kicking around. Succubuses are still kicking around because, again, they exist outside of the lore. Omox is a slime demon. That's new. That's in a Challenge Rating 12. And is literally a slime from the pits of hell. Which is as delightful as it sounds. Serapittus, a suicide demon, that's a bit grim. Is Challenge Rating 15 and trapped with all the misery and horribleness that you would expect from such a creature. Now, they've called this creature, which is the Balor 2.0, a Vrlokai, a death demon. And this is why it's interesting. Powerful Vrlokais command the untamed armies of demonkind, uniting them behind their one unifying desire for death and destruction. Death and destruction from the pits of hell. Unlike other demons, the dreaded Vrlokai doesn't form directly from a single soul. They are instead manifest when a demon devours so many demon souls that their own individual desires are lost in the sinful cacophony. A Vrlokai who survives this process gains great power and can claim a region of the Outer Rifts as their own domain. So they enthusiastically embrace the multitude of sins, which makes them uniquely suited to lead and unite demonkind. such that even demon lords often must rely on Vrlaki to command their forces. The chaotic and conflicting motivations of demon kinds leave little room to find common ground. Imagine that. It's a bit like the Republican Party. Can expand upon the beauty of every kind of sin while marching demon kind armies to battle. Now, one of the things that really stands out in this is, let's just jump down to, not focus flames, consuming death, one action. Concentrate divine visual. The Vrlaki forces their death-stealing gaze upon a single target they can see within 30 feet. The target must immediately attempt a fortitude save against death-stealing gaze. Now, what does death-stealing gaze, I hear you say? This basically can turn you into a ghoul, which struck me as quite interesting because they're kind of... Well, I'll read you death-stealing gaze. It's normally an aura, divine visual 30 feet. When a non-demon ends its turn in the aura, it must attempt a DC 38 fortitude save. If it fails, it becomes drained 1. A creature that dies while it has drain from Vrlaki's gaze rises as a ghoul the next midnight. The DM determines what kind of ghoul. So it's fascinating how I think there's a possible trajectory, and I'll kind of touch more on it because we'll have a brief look at ghouls. They've lost Drow. Big news. Now, a lot of people already informed in the community know that they've lost Drow. There's a reason. And that reason is Drow are proprietary of Wizards of the Coast. So again, when they've had to kind of Paizo review their lore, their world lore, which in many cases is already very diverse and unique to them, they've had to address areas where early on they were simply just using Wizards of the Coast kind of lore and building and adding to it as they went. Drow are part of that process. Now, the loophole they have is that under Elf, you can play a Cavern Elf who has dark vision. Drow. But it's not, it's a Cavern Elf, it's completely different. However, they seem to be making, based on, there's already a very rich lore about ghouls in Pathfinder already, and they already have a really cool mega city down in the Underdark. And the way that this kind of mega death demon, like challenge rating 20, is kind of keying into ghouls and how their story of how they came to be, the first elf that ate and kind of cannibalized another elf. When he died, he came back as like the arch ghoul, and there is kind of demon connotations and a plane in the abyss for them and all that kind of stuff from a deity perspective. I think they're going to make more of a play out of ghouls, and the ghoul entry in here in this new version is again keying into that kind of concept, because again they're kind of already elf-like, they're already in the Underdark, they're already kind of a classic villainous kind of foe. Pathfinder have done a great job already giving them an actual society with an actual kind of purpose and structure. But in the ghoul entry in here, they've changed the artwork so that they're less kind of maddening, kind of monstrous, kind of undead, and more civilized, although it's kind of faded glory civilized. It's kind of trappings of who they were is more at play than being much more classical kind of monster ghoul. I don't know why I had to say monster twice. Perhaps I was trying to emphasize the fact that they were more ghoulish, perhaps, in a previous iteration. If you look at Pathfinder 1 artwork for ghouls, and then you look at this artwork, you can see the transition I'm talking about. It's very different. So, what else does the Balor 2.0 Vrlaki have up his sleeve, other than the ability to make you probably turn into a ghoul? Now, Divine Innate Spells, DC 44, 10th, Execute. I think we all know what that's probably going to do to you. Paralyze, Massacre. These are lovely sounding spells that I'm sure are completely innocent and would not do anything terrible at all. Vampiric exsanguination. Again, slight trappings of undead there. This, and when you look at it, it looks like a, well, it's got four arms. It's got giant bat-like wings. It's got like grey leathery skin and a horrible kind of mutant giant bat demonic head with massive horns. It looks like it looks like an undead demon. It looks like it's positioning itself as a pantheon element for kind of vampires and ghouls and other things, and in ghasts as well. In what's the other one I'm thinking of? The kind of beast wolves that goblins kind of get a bit obsessed about. Not goblin dogs, no. Varghasts, I want to say. But anyway. Focused Flames, another one of its abilities, which is its four kind of black void essence daggers that it can summon and use as weapons. Two actions. The Valkyrie attacks a single target with all of their black flame knives, 4 to be precise. The demon makes a black flame knife strike with the following additional effects. This counts towards the Varoki's multiple attack penalty as a number of attacks equal to the number of black flame knives the Varoki used. But basically, it just focus fires you with its horrible death knives. On a critical success, the target takes an additional 2d6 void damage for each knife beyond the first, typically 66 extra damage as a guide, and takes 46 persistent void damage. Success. The target takes an additional 2d6 void damage for each knife beyond the first. The Varoki deals, and then on a failure, the Varoki deals the damage of their black flame knife strike normally deals on a hit. So you can see how this thing is kind of keyed in on just breaking characters, targeting characters. Mind warping, emotional, mental. The sting of Varoki's mind warping a creature struck must attempt a DC 44 will save. Again, this is another one of its kind of active abilities. Critical success, the creature is unaffected as you'd expect, but on a critical failure, the creature becomes stupefied 1. If it's already stupefied, the value increases by 1 to a maximum of 4. On a critical failure, the creature is confused for 1 minute. Now, in a fight this big, being confused for 1 minute is nightmare fuel. And DC 44 ain't no joke. So, where are we? Where's its actual dagger? Okay, right. Black flame knife, just to give you an idea of what just their knife does. 40 to hit, agile, magical, unholy. 3d4 plus 18, piercing, plus 2d6 void. Doesn't sound that scary, but like I said, with that focus flames ability, they can just roll that up and just keep adding damage on as they kind of go through extra attacks. If it hits, it's just stacking yet more damage on top that becomes persistent, which is terrifying. So he is nasty. Fly speed, 50 feet, as you'd expect. Just, yeah, pretty terrible to be on the wrong end of one of these things. And like I said, that fascinating thing, their ability to raise you as a ghoul, that's interesting. I think they're playing with an idea there, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the next, well, across the next, at least the next book, I would imagine. But there you are. So that is the Vroloki. Now, that's kind of the basics, but there's the big question everyone's probably been asking themselves since the start of this video, which is, what about dragons? And that's not the band. Dragons are brilliant. So I'm going to quickly skip down to them, past the devils, because we don't care about those. And I'm going to skip down past the dinosaurs, because the dinosaurs are still there. And we're going to talk about dragons, because, again, they're here and they are very much in line with where you would expect them to be. Is there a gold dragon? Well, I mean, there's a coloured dragon that perhaps is a goldy sheen, Is there a red dragon? Well, yes, there is a dragon that is reddish of hue, but it's a diabolic dragon. So what have they done? Dragons are brilliant. They have rethemed all the dragons in new and interesting ways so that it's much the dragon you kind of know and expect in the way that they fit into the world with being kind of young and then adult and then that kind of normal traditional process that you're used to. They've kept that framework. And they've kept the idea that they have some magic, and they've kept the idea that they have some special abilities, and they've kept the idea that they have some breath weapons. But what they've done is they have keyed them in to the lore. So an adult diabolic dragon is probably more traditionally in line with what you would consider a red dragon. Hellfire breath, for example. Divine Fire Unholy. The dragon unleashes a blast of infernal fire that deals 12d6 fire damage in a 40-foot cone. DC 30 basic reflex save. The dragon can't use Hellfire Breath again for 1d4 rounds. So you can see already that they've done a very simple thing, which is try and catch all the elements that people like and think are important and intrinsic about dragons that were axiomatic and chromatic, but then they have retailored and themed them to be different, but probably actually cooler. And the reason for that is when you look at kind of the gods, the planes, and the villains that kind of play their part in that pantheon, devils and demons, other outsiders, angels, archaons, the kind of the beings of those realms, dragons sit in this weird place where they're not really connected to either. An axiomatic dragon or a chromatic dragon clearly would have its kind of leanings to and support of, but they are like a separate entity that kind of pops in and is incredibly powerful and can rival them, but isn't quite aligned with anything in particular. It's just there, which is odd. So, having thought about this, diabolic dragon. Just read this one. Hell, according to some theologians, is a living entity in and of itself. Diabolic dragons, those scholars argue, are just extensions of the plane, living creatures that break off from hell to enact its will. Oh dear. Whether this is true or whether diabolical dragons are simply the reborn souls of dragons sent to hell, the fact remains that these dragons are powerful, cunning, and tyrannical. Every diabolic dragon's goal is to further hell's will, though how this will happen can vary. Regardless of goals, these dragons will always approach newcomers with an unsettling calmness. That's right, sociopathic tendencies, much like many CEOs. Again, as you'd expect, they fit in at similar levels. Challenge rating 11 for a young diabolic dragon, 15 for an adult, and then an ancient 20, which I imagine will be terrifying. Armor class 44, 390 hit points, immunity to fire, paralysis, and sleep. Frightful presence, 90 feet, DC 40. Good luck with that. Hell Sting, a reaction. And then reactive strike as a reaction. Oh god. Which obviously reactive strike is the new attack of opportunity that we've had to relingo because of Wizards of the Coast. Thank you very much. Anyway, so let's quickly jump up and have a look at Hell Sting. So it's a reaction, Divine Mental Unholy. Trigger, the dragon is critically hit with a melee attack. The dragon channels the Rancor of Hell back through the body of their foe, overwhelming it with an infernal assault on the mind. The triggering creature takes 66 mental damage with a DC 30 basic will save. Holy creatures use an outcome 1 degree of success worse than they roll on the saving throw. Ow. So there you go. Don't do that as a cleric or a paladin. It will hurt a lot more, because even a critical success will only be a success, which is cool. And then obviously we know how reactive strike works. If they just want to mully you because you moved out of the square they threaten, which is all of them, then yes. Again, Do they fly? Yes, they do. They've got 50 feet of movement on the ground and 120 of fly speed. So again, good luck running away. Now, in terms of diabolic fire, any fire damage that a diabolic dragon deals includes fire damage from spells, is imbued with the unholy power of hell to scorch the spirit as well. Good times. A creature takes spirit damage instead of fire damage if that will be more detrimental to the creature, as determined by the GM. A diabolic dragon is immune to diabolic fire of other diabolic dragons. The fire from divine immolation and similar effects. Ooh, divine immolation. Is that the not gold dragon? Which, if you've already kind of started thinking about how they're keying these together, there is obviously a dragon of hell, lawful evil, traditional kind of, if you're looking at it from that perspective. So what was a black dragon, actually, thinking about it? Black dragon's lawful evil, red dragon's chaotic evil. That's probably right. But obviously there would be a quote-unquote lawful good gold dragon. There is, it's tied to the plane of heaven. There's also a conspirator dragon. There's a magic dragon, which is the artwork for that is awesome. I'll give you a rundown quickly on a magic dragon. A magic dragon wears its hoard, because they all talk about how they have hoards and what they do with hoards, and they all have unique hoards. A magic dragon literally wears its hoard like Gucci Prada. And in the artwork, it's got like gauntlets that are made from breastplates. And it's got like lip piercings for magic swords, because it's punk. And it's got like magical kind of, banners and armor and adorning its whole body, and then loads of like gold coins, kind of like some kind of onesie that it's wearing. And its ability is it can detonate a blast and fire all its magical items out in an area effect and do loads of damage like its breath weapon, and then run around on another round and roll around in it all and pick it all back up and get essentially bonus hit points back. It's like a way of regenerating itself. Badass. That yeah, trust me, it's worth it for the artwork for that alone. So cool. Conspirator dragons, obviously, exactly what you would expect them to be: arch manipulators, getting up to no good, twisting and manipulating the kind of the world of mortal men. Now, is it this one? Yes, it is. Imperial dragon, as in imperial, not imperial. The three major celestial planes, Heaven, Nirvana and Elysium, can have their own respective dragons. Imperial dragons have a direct connection to Heaven. Using the blessings of Heaven, Imperial dragons protect others and intercede against wickedness. Imperial dragons are wise, considerate and compassionate. When speaking with others, Imperial dragons are patient and understanding. Now, I just want to check something. What is the name of their breath weapon? Because have they made them immune to it? No, they haven't, because it's called Spirit Breath. There you go. The dragon unleashes a blast of holy fire that deals 9d8 spirit damage in a 40-foot cone. There you go. So no, I was just curious because I was kind of panicking there, as that would be pretty ruthless if they'd made one completely immune to the primary weapon of the other, which is very unusual. They normally don't do that, so they haven't. This dragon has a halo because it is a dragon from heaven, and it can take its halo off and put its halo down somewhere and leave it there permanently if it chooses to, as an aura effect, essentially leaving its area effect, which buffs your saves against fear and all that kind of stuff, in a place. And can go off, do other things, and then just summon it straight back when it needs it, which is very fun. That's one of its abilities. To give you a very simple example, it's like the Paladin Dragon. except not the 5e lawful good douchebag idiot that turns up and ruins everyone's games by going, no, 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 I have to report that crime. No, 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 I have to betray the party at every opportunity because I think they're not being lawful. It's not that, because they use the words considerate and compassionate, which would imply some form of empathy and intelligence. So the goody goody two shoes super dragon is here and in full effect. Can it heal you? Yes. Can it protect? Yes. Can it defend? Yes. Um, can it use various different abilities to Hulk smash? Yes. But it's tied to heaven. And again, the artwork, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I'm looking at the artwork for the Imperial Dragon, and it's a very familiar looking dragon, except he looks like he perhaps has some like natural paladin armor kind of scales that are like pauldrons on the tops of his shoulders, and he's got a big old halo. But he is gold. Just saying. But anyway, moving on. Fortune dragons. Let's have a look. Fortune dragons are fortune dragon layers. Let's read about a layer. A fortune's dragon layer typically holds a much larger hoard than other dragons collect. These hoards are full of relatively worthless relics, objects, and armaments drained of all their magical energy. And finding useful treasure among them requires a lot of effort. Fortune dragons are particularly protective of the rarest treasures and will either bury them deep within their hoard or keep them directly attached to their bodies where the treasure is safest. A fortune dragon will unleash their full fury to protect their hoard from any outsiders, regardless of the person's standing. Fab, absolutely fab. I wish I could show the artwork easily, but I can't. But yeah, the fortune dragon. When I said magic dragon, I meant fortune dragon, because I was getting keyed up with magical items. He's got like shields on his kind of across his brow, like a building like kind of barding, banners and capes kind of adorning his kind of neck and his wings with more shields down the front to kind of give him more kind of barding, and the breastplate gauntlets, fab. And then obviously, like I said, his gold like a onesie, just genius. Horned dragons are green. Um, I think at one point it even talks about them living in forests from memory. Like you couldn't make this up. And they are like, they're not bestial, but they are like a big kind of combat hitter. They've kind of focused in around that. They've got frightful presence, miasma, which is like a poison area effect. So they're dragons that you know. They're dragons that you understand. They're dragons that you can clearly see how one from previous iterations became another 9 times out of 10 with some new unique twists. But they're free of the curse of OGL. And I think these are better. And the reason I think they're better is because, as I said at the start, they tie into the world more logically. They have a more structured place in and amongst the mechanisms of the kind of gaming mechanic behind the scenes that makes sense. Heaven versus hell, kind of chaos versus order. They're kind of much more naturally aligned with already existing powerful elements that are within the world of Galorian, which I love. And I think that's a really, really smart move. Some of the artwork is very, very cool. There's not as I feel like there's perhaps not as much artwork in this book, but artwork takes a long time, and they have had to move heaven and earth to strip out and replace and renew quite a lot of content across a massive front to protect themselves from what Wizards tried to do. Well, what Hasbro tried to do to everyone in the gaming community, which was steal all their money. It's the long and the short of that. Omen dragons literally are like Chinese imperial / Zinchian kind of creatures, obsessed with kind of like omens and prophecy, impending fate. The dragon's attacks bring their foes closer to their eventual fate. When the dragon critically hits with a strike, or a creature critically fails against its destiny breath, you increase your doomed value by 1. Now, Doomed is the super mega bad thing that happens. When you get wounded and you start dying again, it increases your dying value straight away. Doomed does the same thing, it just bumps you straight down. So even if you were kind of not wounded, you were at full kind of chat, and you take a big hit from this guy, bam, Doomed 1. It's much closer to, dying. And then he hits you again and gets a good kind of hit in, another crit, which again, with these kind of monsters, is quite possible. Doom 2. He could literally probably put you down with a couple of good rolls very, very quickly, which is very, very cool. But again, not obliquely defined by alignment. They look a bit Zinchian, and so my brain, because of Warhammer 40k, was just like, oh, this must be like a villainous dragon, because I was kind of keyed in on that kind of Zinch bad done. But when you actually read about the lore, and they have got like a bit on named dragons for each one. So Gurvalin, the Omen dragon Gurvalin, has become a common sight in the Eye of Dread region of Avestan. The re-emergence of the Lich Tar-Baphon brought about many dangers for the region. Gurvalin, beset by countless portents, travels between the nations of the region to share his visions with the locals, though many of these warnings are vague, making acting upon the information difficult. So he's basically being overwhelmed by kind of omens and portents, and so he's struggling to make sense of it himself because it's so kind of like mega kind of world impacting. But he's desperately trying to help the people of this kind of Eye of Dread region stand a chance against all the threats that are coming against them, but it's proving challenging. But so yeah, this book is, again, it's not revolutionary, and that's not a bad thing, because too much change scares people. What this book does is it gives you a brilliant new take on some stuff that was getting a bit old and stale, in my opinion, and I'm all in favour of it. So, hope you've enjoyed the video. Hope this has given you a kind of nitty-gritty insight into the details that could be waiting for you in the new Monster Call. Jump in. It's available. In fact, I think it's already shipping out to people who are on subscription. So if you've got it on subscription, read it. If you haven't, buy it. Again, I'm going to say this. Is this a book you need? If you've got all the original beastries and you're not that particularly interested in the remaster, no, you don't necessarily need it. But if you're new to the hobby, then this is going to be all you can buy. So it's a good buy. And even if you're someone who just loves collecting lore, this is a good buy, because there's some very cool new stuff in it, and I'm really digging what they're doing with these new dragons. It's made them interesting again, because I've been gaming since like 3rd edition D&D, that is, and gold dragons, red dragons, they've always been there. They haven't gone anywhere. So this is an opportunity to shake them up, and I think they've done a great job of doing that. So hats off to Paizo. Phenomenal work getting this much content un-OGL'd in such a short period of time. That is no mean feat. But gradually, slowly but surely, they are now completely redefining themselves, their lore and their world, as being Paizo. Not Paizo with some Wizards of the Coast hanger-ons. It's now clearly their world, their view, their mission, and their lore, which is great. I'm all in favour. So, check it out. If you want more detailed videos coming up, keep checking back on the channel. I'm not the most regular poster, but when I do post, they're really long and waffly like this one. So enjoy it, crack on, and have a great day. Peace.